What do you expect me to do with that? Stick it in your ear. What? It's only a little one. Listen, it's important. What? It's the verbal cutter. I can't speak verbal. You don't have to. Just put this in your ear.
Have a good time, good time, good time. Message repeat. This is your captain speaking, so stop whatever you're doing and pay attention. First of all, I see from our instruments that we have a couple of hitchhikers on board our ship. Hello, wherever you are.
Shout out to Akira the Don.
I worked hard to get where I am today.
The uncharted backwaters of the unfashionable end of the western spiral arm of the galaxy lies a small, unregarded, yellow sun. Of roughly 92 million miles is an utterly insignificant little blue-green planet whose ape-descended life forms are so amazingly primitive. Descended life forms are so amazingly primitive. That they still think digital watches are a pretty neat idea. This planet has, or rather had, a problem, which was this. Most of the people living on it were unhappy for pretty much of the time. Many solutions were suggested for this problem. Most of these were largely concerned with the movements of small green pieces of paper. Green pieces of paper. Movements of small green pieces of paper. Which is odd. Which is odd. Small green pieces of paper. Which is odd. Because on the whole it wasn't the small green pieces of paper that were unhappy. And so the problem remained. Lots of the people were mean, and most of them were miserable, even the ones with digital watches. Many were increasingly of the opinion that they'd all made a big mistake in coming down from the trees in the first place. And some said,
oh, that was close.
Trees have
shit.
Bad move, and that no one should ever have left the oceans.
It's a good way to end a set.
The oceans. And then, on Thursday, nearly 2,000 years after one man had been nailed to a tree for saying how great it would be to be nice to people for a change. To be nice to people for change. To people for change. To be nice to people for change. For change. Be nice to people. Change. Nice to people. Change. To people for change.
No, I just did the thing. Oh, fuck. That's gonna be it. Oh, fuck.
that even the trees had been a bad move, and that no one should ever have left the oceans. And she finally knew how the world could be made a good and happy, 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 good and happy place. This time it was right. The work. No one would have to get nailed to anything. This time it was right. It would work. And no one would have to get nailed to anything. Sadly, however, before she could get to phone to tell anyone about it, a terrible, stupid catastrophe occurred. The idea was lost forever. This is not her story. This is not her story. But it is the story of that terrible, stupid catastrophe and some of its consequences. It is also the story of a book. A book called The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Not an Earth book, but published on Earth. And until the terrible catastrophe occurred, never seen or even heard of by any Earthman. Nevertheless, a wholly remarkable book. In fact, it was probably the most remarkable book ever to come out of the great publishing corporations of Ursa Minor. Not only is it a wholly remarkable book, it is also a highly successful one. More popular than the Celestial Home Care Omnibus. Better selling than 53 More Things to Do in Zero Gravity. And more controversial than Ulan Kulufit's trilogy of philosophical blockbusters. Where God Went Wrong, the more of God's greatest mistakes. And who is this God person anyway? Who is this God person anyway? Who is this God person anyway? Civilizations on the outer eastern rim of the galaxy. The Hitchhiker's Guide has already supplanted the great Encyclopedia Galactica as the standard repository of all knowledge and wisdom. Although it has many omissions and contains much that is apocryphal, or at least wildly inaccurate, its pause over the older, more pedestrian work in two important respects. First, it is slightly cheaper. And secondly, it has the words, "Don't panic," inscribed in large friendly letters on its cover. The story of this terrible, stupid Thursday, the story of its extraordinary consequences, and the story of how these consequences are inextricably intertwined with this remarkable book, begins very simply, begins very simply, Chapter 1. The house stood on a slight rise just on the edge of the village. It stood on its own and looked out over a broad spread of West Country farmland. Not a remarkable house by any means. It was about 30 years old, squattish, squarish, made of brick, and had 4 windows set in the front of a size and proportion which more or less exactly fails to please the eye. The only person for whom the house was in any way special was Arthur Dent, and that was only because it happened to be the one he lived in. He had lived in it for about 3 years, ever since he had moved out of London, because it made him nervous and irritable. He was about 30 as well, tall, dark-haired, and never quite at ease with himself. Quite at ease with himself. Quite at ease with himself. And never quite at ease with himself. The thing that used to worry him most was the fact that people always used to ask him what he was looking so worried about. He worked in local radio, which he always used to tell his friends was a lot more interesting than they probably thought. It was too. Most of his friends worked in advertising. Wednesday night it had rained very heavily. The lane was wet and muddy, but the Thursday morning sun was bright and clear as it shone on Arthur Dent's house for what was to be the last time. It hadn't properly registered yet with Arthur that the council wanted to knock it down. Build up bypasses instead. At 8 o'clock on Thursday morning, Arthur didn't feel very good. He woke up blearily, got up, wandered blearily round his room, opened a window, saw a bulldozer, found his slippers and stomped off to the bathroom to wash. Toothpaste on the brush, the ceiling. He adjusted it. For a moment it reflected a second bulldozer through the bathroom window. Properly adjusted, it reflected Arthur Dent's bristles. He shaved them off, washed, cried and stomped off to the kitchen to find something pleasant to put in his mouth. Kettle, plug, fridge, milk, coffee, yawn. The word bulldozer wandered through his mind for a moment in search of something to connect with. The bulldozer outside the kitchen window was quite a big one. He stared at it. Yellow, he thought. Low, he thought. And stomped off back to his bedroom to get dressed. Passing the bathroom, he stopped to drink a large glass of water and another. He began to suspect that he was hungover. Why was he hungover? Had he been drinking the night before? He supposed that he must have been. He caught a glint in the shaving mirror. Yellow, he thought, and stomped onto the bedroom. He stood and thought. The pub, he thought. Oh dear, the pub. He vaguely remembered being angry about something that seemed important. He had been telling people about it at great length, he rather suspected. His clearest visual recollection was of something about a new bypass he'd just found out about. It had been in the pipeline for months, only no one seemed to have known about it. Ridiculous. He took a swig of water. It would sort itself out, he had decided. No one wanted a bypass, a leg to stand on. It would sort itself out. God, what a terrible hangover it had earned him, though. He looked at himself in the wardrobe mirror. He stuck out his tongue. Yellow, he thought. The word yellow wandered through his mind in search of something to connect with. 15 seconds later, he was out of the house and lying in front of a big yellow bulldozer that was advancing up a garden path. Mr. L. Prosser was, as they say, only human. In other words, he was a carbon-based bipedal life form descended from an ape. More specifically, he was 40, fat, and shabby, and worked for the local council. Curious enough, though he didn't know it, he was also a direct male-line descendant of Genghis Khan, though intervening generations and racial mixing had so juggled his genes that he had no discernible mongoloid characteristics, and the only vestiges left in Mr. L. Prosser of his mighty ancestry were a pronounced stoutness about the tongue and a predilection for little fur hats. He was by no means a great warrior. In fact, he was a nervous, worried man. Today he was particularly nervous and worried because something had gone seriously wrong with his job, which was to see that Arthur Dent's house got cleared out of the way before the day was out. Come off it, Mr. Dent, he said. You can't win, you know. You can't lie in front of the bulldozer indefinitely. He tried to make his eyes blaze fiercely, but they just wouldn't do it. Arthur lay in the mud and squelched at him. I'm game, he said. We'll see who rusts first. I'm afraid you're going to have to accept it, said Mr. Prosser, gripping his fur hat and rolling it round the top of his head. Prosser shook his finger at him for a bit, then stopped and put it away again. What do you mean, why's it got to be built? He said. It's a bypass. You've got to build bypasses. Bypasses are devices which allow some people to dash from point A to point B very fast, whilst other people dash from point B to point A very fast. People living at point C, being a point directly in between, are often given to wonder what's so great about point A that so many people from point B are so keen to get there, and what's so great about point B that so many people from point A are so keen to get there. We often wish that people would just once and for all work out where the hell they wanted to be. Mr. Prosser wanted to be at point D. Point D wasn't anywhere in particular. It was just any convenient point, a very long way from points A, B, and C. He would have a nice little cottage at point D, with axes over the door, and spend a pleasant point E, which would be the nearest pub to point D. His wife, of course, wanted climbing roses, but he wanted axes. Wife, of course, wanted climbing roses, but he wanted axes. You wanted axes. You didn't know why, you just liked axes. Axes. You didn't know why? He flashed hotly under the derisive grins of the bulldozer drivers. He shifted his weight from foot to foot, but it was equally uncomfortable on each. Obviously somebody had been appallingly incompetent, and he hoped to God it wasn't. Mr. Prosser said, you are quite entitled to make any suggestions or protests at the appropriate time, you know. Appropriate time? Good enough. Appropriate time? The first I knew about it was when a workman arrived at my house yesterday. I asked him if he'd come to clean the windows, and he said no, he'd come to demolish the house. He didn't tell me straight away, of course. Oh no. First he wiped a couple of windows and charged me $5. Then he told me. But Mr. Dent, the plans have been available in the local planning office for the last 9 months. Oh yes, said Arthur. Well, as soon as I heard, I went straight round to see them yesterday afternoon. You hadn't exactly gone out of your way to call attention to them, had you? I mean, like, actually telling anybody or anything. But the plans were on display. On display? I eventually had to go down to the cellar to find them. Well, that's the display department. With a torch. Ah, well, the lights had probably gone. So had the stairs. But look, you found the notice, didn't you? Said Arthur. Yes, I did. It was on display in the bottom of a locked filing cabinet, stuck in a disused lavatory, with a sign on the door saying, "Beware of the leopard." Cloud passed overhead. It cast a shadow over Arthur Dent as he lay propped up on his elbow in the cold mud. It cast a shadow over Arthur Dent's house. Mr. Prosser frowned at it. It's not as if it's a particularly nice house, he said. I'm sorry, but I happen to like it. I'm sorry, but I happen to like it. Happen to like it. You like the bypass? Oh, shut up, said Arthur Dent. Shut up and go away and take your bloody bypass with you. You haven't got a leg to stand on and you know it. You haven't got a leg to stand on and you know it. Mr. Prosser's mouth opened and closed a couple of times. Thus his mind was for a moment filled with inexplicable but terribly attractive visions of Arthur Dent's house being consumed with fire, and Arthur himself running screaming from the blazing ruin with at least 3 hefty spears protruding from his back. Mr. Prosser was often bothered with visions like these, and they made him feel very nervous. He stuttered for a moment, and then pulled himself together. Mr. Bent, he said. Hello, yes, said Arthur. Some factual information for you. Have you any idea how much damage that bulldozer would suffer if I just let it roll straight over you? How much, said Arthur. None at all, said Mr. Prosser, and stormed nervously off, wondering why his brain was filled with 1,000 hairy horsemen, all shouting at him. By a curious coincidence, none at all is exactly how much suspicion the ape descendant Arthur Dent had that one of his closest friends was not descended from an ape, but was in fact from a small planet somewhere in the vicinity of Betelgeuse, and not from Guildford, as he usually claimed. Arthur Dent had never, ever suspected this. This friend of his had first arrived on the planet Earth some 15 Earth years previously, and he'd worked hard to blend himself into Earth society, with, it must be said, some success. Since he had spent those 15 years pretending to be an out-of-work actor, which was plausible enough. He had made one careless blunder, though, because he had skimped a bit on his preparatory research. The information he had gathered had led him to choose the name Ford Prefect as being nicely inconspicuous. He was not conspicuously tall. His features were striking but not conspicuously handsome. His hair was wiry and gingerish and brushed backwards from the temples. His skin seemed to be pulled backwards from the nose. There was something very slightly odd about him, but it was difficult to say what it was. Perhaps it was that his eyes didn't seem to blink often enough. And when you talked to him for any length of time, your eyes began involuntarily